Your role doesn't align with our corporate structure, Caroline explained over a brief Zoom call. Your department is being consolidated. My name is Rachel Morgan, 52 years old, Senior Development Director at Greencore Technologies in Austin, Texas. For 15 years, I had led teams and built systems that transformed us from a tiny startup into a respected force in renewable energy solutions. Every major platform, every key process, I had my fingerprints on all of them. When Caroline delivered the news, I didn't argue or show emotion. I calmly asked about the transition process and logged off, professional to the end. That was 3 weeks ago. Now, I sat in my home office, coffee in hand, reviewing the non-compete clause in my contract. The legal language was riddled with loopholes. The acquiring company's legal team had been sloppy, probably assuming employees from a smaller firm wouldn't notice or couldn't afford a legal battle. That was their mistake. My phone buzzed with another message from Ben, our lead systems architect, the fifth engineer to reach out since the acquisition was announced. You were right about the new management. They're gutting the innovation pipeline. Are you still thinking about that project we discussed? I set the phone down without responding. Not yet. Timing mattered. The acquisition had been celebrated across the industry. Everest Energy Corporation, a Fortune 500 giant, was absorbing our promising young company. The press release praised our complementary capabilities and shared vision. Caroline Vega, Everest's newly appointed CEO for our division, had promised minimal disruption. Empty words. The first layoffs came within 8 days. I opened my laptop and pulled up the business plan I had been quietly refining for months. Not because I predicted being fired, though honestly I had my suspicions, but because I could see the company's trajectory changing long before the acquisition. The executives were chasing quarterly numbers instead of innovation. When Everest made their offer, our leadership team practically fell over themselves to accept. Their eagerness should have been the first warning sign. In the kitchen, I poured another cup of coffee and stared at the whiteboard mounted on my wall. It listed Greencore's top clients, their pain points, and the solutions my team had developed, solutions soon to be dismantled by people who didn't understand them. Below those names was another list, 5 engineers, some of the best minds I'd worked with, all of whom I had mentored. Now, they were privately asking me what came next. I hadn't answered yet because my plan wasn't ready, but it would be soon. I had joined Greencore when it was just 10 people working out of a rented co-working space. The founder, Jack Preston, had a bold vision for transforming solar grid management, but lacked the technical framework to make it happen. I built that framework, working 80-hour weeks, sacrificing weekends, and, eventually, my marriage. You're married to that company, my ex-husband said during our final argument. He wasn't wrong. For over a decade, I turned down offers from larger companies offering better salaries and benefits. Jack made me feel valued. This is your company too, Rachel, he'd tell me. We didn't have formal equity agreements, a mistake I now realize, but there was always the promise that loyalty would be rewarded when success came. Then, 3 years ago, Jack's health declined, and his son, Ryan, took over. Ryan had an MBA from a top university, but none of his father's passion. His focus was on making Greencore attractive for acquisition, not building something that lasted. The company culture shifted. Quarterly metrics replaced innovation goals. When I raised concerns, Ryan would nod politely and say, "We'll circle back to that, Rachel." We never did. 6 months ago, I overheard Ryan talking with 2 Everest executives about which teams would be redundant. My department was at the top of the list. That night, I began quietly drafting the blueprint for Summit Innovations, a company that would stand on the very principles Greencore was abandoning. I kept it under wraps, kept performing at a high level, and waited. If they kept me, I would stay loyal. If not, I was ready. The first real sign came when Caroline scheduled individual meetings with every department head, except me. Then I was removed from key strategy emails. 2 days before my termination, Caroline asked for access to all my project archives and development roadmaps. I handed everything over, professional to the end. When the Zoom call finally came, it lasted exactly 7 minutes. But what Caroline didn't know was that as she outlined my severance package, I was already texting Ben. Time to talk about that project. Dinner at my place tomorrow, 7 p.m. The next chapter was already in motion. Then Jack developed health problems 3 years ago, and his son Ryan took over. Ryan had his MBA from an impressive university, but he lacked his father's passion for the work. He was focused on making Greencore attractive for acquisition rather than building something lasting. The culture shifted. Quarterly metrics replaced innovation goals. When I raised concerns in executive meetings, Ryan would nod politely and say, "We'll circle back to that, Rachel." We never did. 6 months ago, I overheard Ryan in the conference room with 2 Everest executives discussing which teams would be redundant after the acquisition. My department was at the top of their list. That night, I began sketching what would eventually become the blueprint for Summit Innovations, a competing firm built on everything Greencore was abandoning. I kept my plans quiet, continued performing at a high level, and waited. If they decided to keep me, I would stay loyal. If not, I had a backup ready. The first sign that my position was truly in jeopardy came when Caroline scheduled individual meetings with each department head, except me. Then I was quietly removed from strategic planning emails. Finally, Marcus from Human Resources requested just a quick chat about my team structure. Still, I updated documentation, trained junior engineers, and made myself as indispensable as I could. Or so I thought. 2 days before my termination, Caroline asked for access to my project archives and development roadmaps. I provided everything promptly and thoroughly, professional to the end. When the Zoom call came, it lasted exactly 7 minutes. She didn't know that while she was explaining my transition package, I was already texting Ben. Time to talk about that project. Dinner at my place tomorrow, 7 p.m. 5 engineers showed up at my house that night. They all had the same story, marginalized by new management, innovations shelved, concerns dismissed. They were waiting for someone to build something better. The moment that truly crystallized everything was watching Caroline's first company-wide presentation. 6 weeks after the acquisition, with 47 people already laid off, she stood on the stage that once showcased our technical achievements and unveiled Everest's integration roadmap. Greencore systems will be phased out over 18 months, she announced as we transitioned to Everest's enterprise architecture. The architecture she referred to was outdated by at least 3 years. Our team had developed solutions specifically because Everest's approach couldn't handle the complexity modern clients demanded. Now they were scrapping our innovations to force-fit their existing framework. In the audience, I watched the remaining engineers exchange glances. They knew what this meant. Years of work erased, client needs ignored. The very innovations that had made Greencore valuable enough to acquire were about to be dismantled. I didn't speak during the Q&A, didn't challenge Caroline's cheerful assertions about synergies and economies of scale. I simply watched, noting who nodded along with her statements and who stared down at their notebooks, avoiding eye contact. After the meeting, I walked to my car in the parking garage. I sat there for almost an hour, the engine off, hands on the steering wheel, thinking. This wasn't just about me losing my job. This was about something I had helped build being deliberately dismantled by people who didn't understand its value. That night, I opened my laptop and finalized the business plan I had been developing. What had started as a contingency was now becoming a mission. This wasn't just about me losing my job. This was about something I had helped build, being deliberately dismantled by people who didn't understand its value. That evening, I opened my laptop and finalized the business plan I'd been working on for months. What had started as a backup plan was now becoming real. I created a secure messaging group with the 5 engineers who had come to my house after my termination. If you're serious about building something better, I have a proposal. Discretion essential. All 5 responded within minutes. Count me in. For the next 3 weeks, we met in the evenings at my house in Austin. We pored over Everest's approach, mapped out the gaps they were missing, and listed the clients most likely to be dissatisfied once the changes rolled out. We carefully outlined what had made Greencore's system superior and how we could push those ideas further, all while steering clear of intellectual property violations. I used my severance package to lease a small office space on the east side of Austin and filed the paperwork to establish Summit Innovations. The name was no accident. It symbolized rising above what Greencore had become. The day after I received my final paycheck from Everest, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan Preston. "Heard you might be starting something. We should talk before you do anything hasty." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to discuss. The time for conversations had passed weeks ago when Caroline decided my 15 years of contributions counted for nothing. Instead, I messaged the team. Office space secured. Legal documents filed. Timeline accelerated. "Are you ready to resign tomorrow?" Within minutes, 5 variations of yes lit up my phone. I closed my laptop and looked at the framed photo on my bookshelf. The original Greencore team from 15 years ago, Jack Preston's arm around my shoulder, both of us smiling beside the first working prototype. "This one's for you, Jack," I whispered. "We'll build it right this time." 3 months after Summit Innovations launched, we landed our first major client, Clearwater Manufacturing, a mid-size facility that had used Greencore systems for years. Their operations director, Mark, had worked closely with me in the past to customize solutions for their specific energy management needs. "Everest's team doesn't understand what we need," Mark said during our pitch meeting. "They keep trying to force us into their standard package." We demonstrated our new platform, which honored Greencore's core principles but offered significant improvements. Mark signed the contract that same day. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived from Everest Energy's legal department, citing breach of non-compete agreements and theft of proprietary information. They demanded immediate cessation of operations and threatened litigation. I had anticipated this. Our attorney, Eleanor Winslow, reviewed the letter and confirmed what I already suspected. Their non-compete is poorly written. They're trying to intimidate you, but they have no grounds. And they can't prove any theft of proprietary data because there isn't any. Still, battling a Fortune 500 company could drain us. I decided to go straight to the source. I requested a meeting with Caroline. She agreed, likely assuming I would be rattled. We met at Everest's downtown Austin office, where the Greencore logo was now a tiny plaque in the lobby's corner. "You understand this can't continue," Caroline said the moment we sat down. "Your company directly competes with technology you helped develop while you were employed here. Your company directly competes with technology you helped develop while you were employed here." I met Caroline's sharp gaze calmly. "The technology one developed while employed here is being phased out according to your own integration roadmap," I replied. "And my non-compete specifically prohibits using Greencore's proprietary systems, which we aren't." Summit's architecture was built from the ground up. Caroline's expression tightened. "Regardless, you've violated the spirit of the agreement. And you've poached our employees." I held her gaze steady. "Former employees who left voluntarily after the acquisition changed their roles." She leaned forward, a faint smile at the corners of her mouth. "Rachel, let's be practical. Everest has virtually unlimited resources for litigation. You have what? 3 months of operating capital? Why put yourself through this? We could bring you back as a consultant during the transition. 2-year contract. Excellent compensation." There it was, the trap. They didn't want to bring me back. They wanted to bind me legally, neutralizing any competitive threat. "I appreciate the offer," I said, standing up, "but I'll take my chances with Summit." That afternoon, Everest escalated. They contacted Clearwater Manufacturing and 2 other potential clients, warning them of potential legal risks tied to Summit's technology. Mark, Clearwater's operations director, called me immediately. They're threatening to audit our existing systems and void our maintenance agreements if we work with you, he said, frustration clear in his voice. We can't risk that kind of disruption right now. Within 24 hours, we lost all 3 prospects. Our runway shrank from months to weeks. That evening, the team gathered in our modest office. Faces tense, eyes on me. They're playing hardball, I acknowledged, looking around at the engineers I had mentored for years. But they've made a strategic mistake. I pulled up an email I'd received that morning from Jack Preston, Greencore's original founder. He had been watching the acquisition unfold quietly from retirement. Rachel, I've been following what's happening. Everest didn't just acquire Greencore's technology. They acquired its problems, too. Call me. I think we can help each other. I looked around at my team. Everest is so focused on crushing us, they're neglecting their integration. We know Greencore's architecture better than anyone. Ben nodded slowly, the realization dawning on his face. And those clients will need solutions fast. Exactly, I said. They're trying to bury us with legal threats while their technical foundation is falling apart. We don't need to fight them directly. We just need to be ready when their clients start looking for alternatives. The meeting with Jack Preston changed everything. We met at his lake house outside Austin, away from curious eyes. At 75, Jack moved more slowly now, but his mind was as sharp as ever. They didn't just buy Greencore for the technology, Jack explained, spreading documents across the dining table. They bought it for the client contracts, especially the Meridian Energy Group account. Meridian was Greencore's largest client, a regional utility provider serving 3 states. Their contract alone accounted for 30% of Greencore's annual revenue. Jack leaned back, his expression serious. What Everest doesn't understand is that Meridian's infrastructure requirements are unique. Their grid management system was customized extensively, and you led that project, Rachel. I nodded, the memory rushing back. For years of development, countless late nights, a relentless push to get it right. Jack slid a confidential memo across the table, internal Everest communications forwarded by a board member still loyal to him. They're promising Meridian seamless integration while planning to force them onto Everest's standard architecture. The timeline they've proposed? Impossible. The memo outlined a 6-month migration schedule for a system that had taken us 4 years to build. Even worse, it dismissed Meridian's custom requirements as unnecessary customizations to be standardized. Jack's voice softened. Meridian's CEO doesn't know yet, but when implementation begins and the limitations become clear, they'll face service disruptions, possibly regulatory issues if they can't maintain required reporting, I finished quietly. Jack nodded. Exactly. And here's what Everest doesn't realize. The contract we negotiated with Meridian includes performance guarantees. If they fail to meet 99% uptime, the penalties are severe. This was the piece I hadn't known. Everest hadn't just acquired Greencore, they had inherited obligations they couldn't fulfill. No wonder they were trying so hard to shut us down. What Everest doesn't understand is that Meridian's infrastructure requirements are unique, Jack continued. Their grid management system was customized extensively. You led that project, Rachel. I nodded slowly. For years of development, nearly burned out my entire team to get it right. Jack slid a confidential memo across the table, his expression tight. It was an internal Everest communication, forwarded by a board member still loyal to Jack. They're promising Meridian seamless integration while planning to force them onto Everest's standard architecture, Jack said. The timeline is impossible. The memo outlined a 6-month migration schedule for a system that had taken us 4 years to build. Even worse, it dismissed specific requirements as unnecessary customizations that would simply be standardized. Meridian's CEO doesn't know yet, Jack said quietly. But when they begin implementation and the limitations become clear, Meridian will face service disruptions, possibly regulatory issues if they can't maintain required reporting. I finished his thought. Jack gave a sharp nod. Exactly. And here's what Everest doesn't realize. The contract I negotiated with Meridian includes performance guarantees, significant penalties if the systems don't maintain 99% uptime. This was the missing piece I hadn't known. Everest hadn't just acquired Greencore. They had inherited obligations they couldn't fulfill. No wonder they were so desperate to shut down Summit. But as I looked closer at Jack, I sensed something more. A personal edge to his involvement. "Why are you helping us?" I asked directly. "Everest paid you well for the acquisition." Jack's gaze hardened. "They did. Then they used clauses in the agreement to devalue the final payment, citing integration costs." His voice tightened. Ryan didn't understand what he was signing. The deal that made headlines? We got about 60% of that figure. My son's stake was wiped out entirely. There it was. Everest hadn't just discarded the Greencore team, they had cheated the founders, too. "Does Ryan know you're talking to me?" I asked. Jack shook his head slowly. Ryan took a position with Everest's corporate development team. He thinks he's being groomed for executive leadership. Jack's voice carried the weight of fatherly disappointment. "He'll learn, eventually." As I drove back through Austin that night, a new understanding crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just about my termination or Everest's bad management. This was about systematic corporate predation. Identifying small, innovative companies with valuable client relationships. Acquiring them under false pretenses. Extracting the talent, the contracts, the intellectual property. Discarding the people. And walking away from the mess. I pulled into my driveway and sat in silence for several minutes, the quiet of the Texas evening pressing in. Processing it all. Then I called Ben. "Contact the team. Meeting at the office tomorrow, 7 a.m. We need to accelerate development of our Meridian-compatible system. And pull every piece of documentation we have on their grid architecture." Ben's voice crackled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Are we going after Meridian?" "Not yet," I replied, a calm resolve settling over me. "But we're going to be ready when they start looking for help." And they will, sooner than Everest expects. We had 8 weeks to prepare for Meridian's inevitable crisis. My team worked around the clock, developing a platform that could seamlessly interface with Meridian's existing infrastructure while offering the improvements they would soon be desperate for. I kept a careful distance from Meridian's leadership, knowing Everest was likely monitoring any communication. Instead, I focused on strengthening our capacity and building a robust evidence base. We documented every public failure in Everest's integration efforts, assembling a comprehensive analysis of where their approach was fundamentally flawed. Meanwhile, Jack quietly activated his industry network. Without directly revealing our strategy, he began raising pointed questions at energy sector conferences about the technical challenges of forced system migrations. The conversation was happening exactly where we wanted it, in the professional circles where Meridian's technical leaders operated. The first major crack appeared 5 weeks into our preparation. Everest launched the first phase of Meridian's system migration, and just as we had anticipated, the problems began immediately. 3 substations experienced monitoring failures, leaving significant gaps in regulatory compliance data. Meridian's Chief Technology Officer, Vanessa Powell, publicly downplayed the situation as routine transition challenges. But privately, according to Jack's contacts, Vanessa was livid. 2 weeks later, things escalated when the second phase of integration caused a 4-hour reporting blackout across an entire service region. This time, Meridian issued a formal notice of deficiency to Everest, triggering the performance guarantee clauses embedded in their contract. Everest's response was revealing. They pinned the blame on inherited architectural limitations from Greencore, setting up a narrative to void the performance guarantees by claiming the original system was defective. That was the opening we had been waiting for. I drafted a detailed technical analysis showing that the failures weren't due to Greencore's architecture, but stemmed directly from Everest's incompatible integration approach. Jack personally delivered the document to Vanessa Powell. 3 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. Coffee tomorrow, 2 p.m., West Side Rowers. It was signed simply, VP. When I arrived at the cafe, Vanessa was already seated in a quiet corner booth. She wasted no time. Your analysis matches our internal findings, she said softly. Everest is trying to force us into their system to avoid maintaining our customizations. The regulatory risks are unacceptable. You have options, I replied carefully. Vanessa gave me a wry smile. Do I? Our contract with Everest is binding. Breaking it would trigger penalties that would wipe out our annual technology budget. Unless Everest is in material breach through performance failures, I suggested, which your legal team is likely exploring right now. Vanessa's slight nod confirmed my assumption. We'd still need an immediate alternative, she added. Regulatory reporting doesn't wait for a new vendor search. I slid a flash drive across the table. This contains a technical overview of Summit's platform. It's designed specifically to address the issues you're facing. We can deploy within 3 weeks, with zero regulatory interruption. Vanessa pocketed the drive without glancing at it. Everest claims you violated non-compete agreements, she said. They've made that claim. Yes, I answered, but their legal position has significant weaknesses, which our counsel has already documented. I handed Vanessa a second flash drive. This contains our attorney's analysis. Your legal team will find it illuminating. Vanessa gave a single nod. I'll be in touch. 2 days later, Everest announced an emergency stabilization of Meridian systems, effectively admitting their integration approach had failed. Their stock dropped 8% by market close. That evening, I received an official request for proposal from Meridian Energy Group, bypassing their normal procurement process under emergency provisions. I gathered my team at Summit Innovations. This is it, I told them. Meridian needs a solution immediately, and we've built exactly what they need. Everything we've worked for comes down to this proposal. Ben glanced around at our small but determined group. Should we be worried about Everest's reaction once they realize what's happening? I shook my head calmly. They created this crisis. Now they'll have to watch us solve it. The Meridian board meeting was set for 10 a.m. on Thursday. By 10:45, my phone rang. Unanimous approval, Vanessa said without preamble. Expedited contract execution. We need implementation to begin Monday. Within the hour, our attorney confirmed the contract was airtight, no hidden clauses, no traps. Meridian agreed to our full implementation fee plus a 3-year maintenance agreement. The numbers were substantial enough to secure Summit's future for years to come. More importantly, the contract included specific indemnification against Everest's potential legal claims. Meridian's attorneys had reviewed our position and confirmed what we already knew: Everest's non-compete claims wouldn't hold up under serious scrutiny. By mid-afternoon, the news had hit the industry. Everest's stock dropped another 12%. Their legal team immediately filed for an emergency injunction to block our contract. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning, the same day our implementation was set to begin. When we arrived at the courthouse, Everest had 4 attorneys present, led by their chief counsel. Caroline sat behind them, her expression tight with controlled anger. The judge reviewed the filings efficiently, scanning each document with sharp precision. Then she looked directly at Everest's team. Your non-compete agreements appear to prohibit the use of proprietary green core systems, the judge said evenly, but the evidence suggests Summit developed independent architecture. Furthermore, Meridian's filing demonstrates urgent public interest in maintaining utility service reliability. Without further deliberation, she denied the injunction. As we exited the courtroom, Caroline intercepted me in the hallway. "This isn't over," she murmured quietly. "Everest doesn't lose." I met her gaze without flinching. "This was never about winning or losing," I said calmly. "It was about building something that actually works." I walked past her to where my team waited at the end of the hall. Together, we stepped outside to begin the implementation that would secure both Meridian's systems and Summit's future. The quiet victory felt complete. 18 months after the Meridian contract, Summit Innovations had grown to 27 employees. We occupied the entire floor of a downtown Austin building with sweeping views of the Texas skyline, a city that had witnessed both my professional collapse and my resurrection. The Meridian implementation had been flawless, completed ahead of schedule with zero service interruptions. Word spread quickly across the industry. Within a year, more major clients migrated to our platform, solidifying our reputation as the team that delivered where the giants failed. Within a year, Everest quietly abandoned their legal pursuit, focusing instead on containing the fallout in their energy division. Caroline Vega was reassigned to a distant subsidiary in another state. Ryan Preston left Everest entirely, landing at a startup incubator, a little wiser from the experience. Jack Preston, meanwhile, occasionally stopped by our Summit Innovations office, pride glowing in his eyes as he watched a vision reborn. He never formally joined the company, but his guidance remained invaluable. On the second anniversary of my termination, I received an unexpected email from my former boss at Greencore, the person who had hired me nearly 15 years earlier. "You built something better than we ever could have," he wrote. Several of us saw it coming, but we couldn't stop the acquisition. Some victories just take time. I closed my laptop and walked to the conference room where our team was gathered, celebrating the completion of a major new module. They were no longer just colleagues, they were partners, people who had taken the same leap I had, betting that competence and integrity would ultimately outshine corporate politics. Later that evening, I stood alone on my back deck, watching the Texas sunset cast warm gold across the hills. The bitterness I had once carried, the sting of betrayal, had faded. In its place was something unexpected: gratitude. Without Everest's arrogance, without Caroline's dismissal, Summit Innovations might never have existed. I hadn't just reclaimed my career. I had built something far more aligned with my values than Greencore could ever have become under Everest's control. Sometimes, getting pushed out of the wrong place is exactly what you need to find the right one.